Hello and welcome to Exeter Outdoors. On today's episode, we're going to be diving into Exeter's agricultural past. Raynes Farm is rich in history, and it's great for hiking and bird watching.
Every family, most every family has their box of pictures and their albums and things that tell about the history of the life of their family. I look at this as the same way. This tells of the history and the life of the town.
I love barns and what they stand for, but the setting, the surrounding fields, the woods, it has it all for me.
Raynes Farm is located just off of Newfields Road on your way out of town. It's a great place to go bird watching. You can see large raptors such as this turkey vulture, red-tailed hawks, and even herons from the nearby Squamscott River. Information and a map of trails can be found at the kiosk at the parking lot. One path leads to a granite underpass, which was used to get cattle under the train tracks and out to the town landing on the Squamscott. Starting at the barn, you can follow a path to the Wiggins family gravesite. A historical gravesite dating back to the 1800s.
Thousands of people go by on the highway, the Newfields Highway here, and I suppose as they go by, they may catch it out of their corner of their eye and wonder what this barn is and why it's there and what its history is. And if you look at the history of the barn, you have to look at the history of the farm. The farm goes back to the late 1700s, when the house over here was a gift by one of the Gilmans to a daughter. And in the late 1700s it was built. And so it became a farm, and it was a farm of about 150 acres. There was 100 and some acres on that side, and there was 50 acres on this side. The barn probably was built as a barn farm or barn raising, as they did in those days, when the neighbors would all come. And this wasn't a main highway then, it was just a farm road that came up here and ended. And so they would come up here and they would do this barn raising in 1860, but that was the same year that Lincoln came to Exeter to see his son Robert. And so you can imagine the people coming here and having a farm raising and working in the barn and then getting up in their wagons and going back to town to see Lincoln. So this is the context of this barn. And so it's an icon, but it's also an historic part.
At the time of the Civil War era too, and actually Exeter was known as the cow town, and they used to have farm expositions in town, and the former rec department, present rec department was an exposition hall, and so that was a big to-do in town when you had these farm expositions.
And it was called the Exeter Cattle Market, and there were pens out here where the cattle were, corrals where the cattle came, and drovers would bring cattle down in the hundreds here, and then they would be shipped out across the railroad tracks. The railroad came here in 1840. Across the railroad tracks, or actually under the tracks, to the town landing, and then be shipped out.
They came from Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, and then as Don said, they went down to the town landing and they were put on barges to take to the Brighton markets, which were slaughterhouses, I guess, and then taken to feed the troops for the Civil War, which I find absolutely fascinating.
So this was a part of the economic fabric of Exeter. He was a very wealthy, turned out to be a wealthy farmer, and it was part of the economy of Exeter. As we mentioned upstairs, the barn and the farm was a cattle raising, the Exeter Cattle Market Farm, until right after World War II. Then John Raynes bought it, and he lived across the street in the farmer's house and turned it into a dairy farm. He put the silo up at the east end and then excavated the barn. We believe that it was not used for anything but manure storage and manure cleanout from whatever cattle would be upstairs. And then he had about 40 head of cattle, or dairy cows. And so they'd be milked twice a day here. And so it was a milk production area until about the 1970s. It's the only 100-foot barn in Exeter. There were others, but they're gone. And this is actually 96 feet. They call it a 100-foot barn by 40 feet. It's a traditional barn framing. It's the way it has been built, all mortise and tenon and dowels. They did not use nails except for the sheathing on the outside. So it's a classic barn, and it's the only one left in Exeter. What we see this barn and the farm being used for as a venue for education, venue for recreation. This last year, for example, with Jenny and a lot of the Conservation Commission members' work, there was a pumpkin toss that was held out here. And there about 800 people showed up, and there was the catapult, which is stored here in the barn. And it was out there, and it was a great event. And when the snow has allowed us, and this year, the last 2 years it has not, we hold a winter snowshoe, a moonlight snowshoe event. We've had artists out here, and we're now looking to have some low-scale theatrical productions that use the front entrance of the barn as an amphitheater. I think recognizing the farm and the barn in terms of its historical significance, economic, cultural, social, as part of the fabric of the town is important. We save buildings where they have importance. We have the Exeter Historic Commission, the HDC, for that purpose, because we recognize in town that there are buildings that represent the history of the town and the people. This is not part of the HDC out here, but this is certainly a building, a farm, and a barn that represents the character of the town, the people, the history, the fabric. Most every family has their box of pictures and their albums and things that tell about the history of the life of their family. I look at this as the same way. This tells of the history and the life of the town. And being that it's the last barn of this size in the town and what it represented economically, this is very much worth restoring and keeping and then sharing it with the town through use. I think that's what we should be doing and why that's important.
As Exeter grows and expands, this is well, not the last place, but this is a place that one can come to and just have idyllic views, be alone, be at one with the environment, just untouched. To me, that's the selfish part I enjoy. I love barns and what they stand for, but the setting, the surrounding fields, the woods, it has it all for me. I just would like to have something that Exeter can use and not have to drive an hour or so, that they come out just for an afternoon of refreshment.